Mechanism Monday, Tom Brady's hats. Last night, Thomas Edward Patrick Brady Jr. won his seventh Super Bowl championship with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And with 7 rings, he takes the distinction of having more rings than any player and more rings than any NFL franchise. Just two of the many stats that further solidify his place as the greatest quarterback and player in the history of the game. He did it without his former coach. He did it without his former team. And according to ESPN, did so in spectacular fashion against young phenom Patrick Mahomes. So there's a lot to celebrate. And for the record, I'm not one for peeing on anyone's picnic. So I am not going to remind you that Tom Brady endorsed Donald Trump, who turned and galvanized and endorsed a bunch of racists, supremacists, sexists, and xenophobes. I'm not going to remind you that Tom chose to show off his shiny new MAGA hat all on his own. I'm not going to remind you that Tom has been super quiet about his good friend lately. I'm not going to remind you that Tom never took the kind of heat for his friend that Kanye did. I'm not going to remind you that Fox never called him a dumb jock or basically told him to shut up and dribble. I'm not going to remind you that Tom was able to sweep his political opinion smooth under the rug. I'm not going to remind you that LeBron James has never gotten that privilege. I'm not going to remind you that Colin Kaepernick has never gotten that privilege or a job. I'm not going to remind you that Cap was blackballed thanks in parts to tweets from Tom's good friend. I'm not going to remind you that Tom's good friend Trump called for those sons of bitches to be fired. I'm not going to remind you that Tom turned church mouse when that happened. I'm not going to remind you that Tom has never had a Black Lives Matter or even a Colin Kaepernick hat on display in his locker. I'm not going to remind you of none of that. I'm just going to remind you that I ain't forgot.